Hi, this is Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. Today's talk is on the gluten-free lie. I've seen patients come into my office every single day that have been on a gluten-free diet, a conventional gluten-free diet. Some have gotten some results and maybe some have gotten none. And the question is, what are the next steps to really kind of unlock the body's ability to heal? And we see a gluten-free diet, a conventional gluten-free diet, is not enough. And we're going to go over why this is the case and what the next steps you need to do so you can be successful. So we have celiac disease and we have gluten sensitivity. Now, it's important to note that if you have celiac disease, you are gluten sensitive. But if you are gluten sensitive, you may not have celiac disease. And that kind of flies in the face of conventional medicine because typical gastroenterologists think of celiac disease as the only form of gluten sensitivity. But we know the research shows otherwise. So when we diagnose someone with celiac disease, typically it's a scoping of the small intestine, and then we're taking some samples of the microvilli, or the little finger-like projections in your small intestine that act like vacuum cleaners to suck up nutrition. And what we see is that carpeting, or that villi gets worn down. And when it's worn down to 80% or less, that's a sign of celiac disease. So if it's not worn down, maybe only 60% or 50%, or let's say we go in there and don't snip the right sampling of the villi, let's say we get maybe some of the healthy villi, then you're stuck in this level of you're just undiagnosed and it's all in your head and there's nothing we can do about it. But we know in functional medicine world that gluten sensitivity is very real, and you don't have to have full-blown celiac disease or even subclinical celiac to essentially have a problem with gluten. So it's the iceberg underneath that we're worried about, because these are the people that don't get diagnosed. So we want to make sure these people have information on what steps to do to move forward here. So we know that most people who have celiac disease, a lot of the research in regards to gluten is on celiac disease because of that inherent link, don't recover, don't heal from a gluten-free diet. So this study here is talking about how the first part of the small intestine, the duodenum, lesions are not healing, even on a strict gluten-free diet. So why is that? We have more research from the American Journal of Gastroenterology. We know that mucosal recovery and mortality in adults with celiac disease doesn't happen too often. So this study shows that mucosal recovery was absent in a substantial amount of the adults with celiac disease on a gluten-free diet. So why is this? Well, first off, we know that the whole terminology of celiac disease and gluten sensitivity needs to be updated. And what we're finding is that gluten sensitivity is a state of genetics. It's the immune system is heightened, is more responsive to these ingested gluten proteins. And we see it in genetically predisposed individuals. So we can actually do genetic tests. If you want to be more specific, we see certain genes such as the DQ8 and DQ2 genes being a big sign of potential celiac and gluten sensitivity, and even more subclinical genes such as the A1 and the B1 genes, also a strong sign of gluten sensitivity. Again, what is gluten? Well, typically the story of gluten is a doctor in 1942, Dr. William Dickey. He was a German physician. He worked in a hospital ward with celiac patients, and this is before we knew what caused or what contributed to celiac disease. So essentially, when the war started, a shortage of grains occurred, and wheat, rye, and barley were in shortage, so they couldn't get these grains up to the hospital patients. And what he found over a couple of months, he found that his celiac patients started healing. And he just looked back and said, well, it must be the shortage of these wheat, rye, and barley that are causing the healing. And when World War II was over, these foods were then reintroduced because the economy was better, and he noticed the celiac disease came back. So from this experimental observation, he was able to see that the Triticale family, the wheat, rye, and barley, and sometimes oat, were the main cause. So when we go a little bit deeper, what is gluten? So gluten typically is the protein found in the endosperm of grain. And grains are nothing more than the proteins found in seeds of grass. So these prolamines or gluten, these are interchangeable words. A prolamine is a specific type of gluten. All right, prolamines and glutens are kind of used interchangeably here. Now, what's happened in conventional kind of nutrition and medicine world, we think of gluten as wheat, barley, and rye, but really when we're talking about gluten, we're really just referring to gliadin. Again, the rye and the barley have gotten lumped in due to the early research on celiac recovery, but when we're talking about going gluten-free, we're typically referring to gliadin-free, and we've lumped in the other proteins in rye, such as the secalin as well as the hordein. But you can see these are all prolamines, and glutens, these are all gluten. So prolamines are essentially another word of describing glutens, and glutens encompass all of these grains on here. So to go grain free, you really want to be, essentially to go gluten free, you really want to be grain free. And you can see some grains are worse than others. So we see sorghum. So if you're drinking gluten-free beer, that may not be a good alternative if you're having some gut or health issues. You can see with barley, obviously gluten in there. You can see corn, high amount of prolamines. So again, rice is on the lesser side of things, so rice is a lesser of the evils when it comes to the grains. But if you really want to be gluten-free, you need to be grain-free, and that's pretty evident looking at the prolamine fractions of these grains, looking at the gluten content of these grains. So we have the web of gluten sensitivity. This is the web that really touches I say almost every person in this country, a great majority of patients. Typically, what we find is 1 out of 8 patients actually have gastrointestinal problems due to gluten. What the research is showing, for every 1 out of 8 that are having gastrointestinal problems such as diarrhea, bloating, gas, 7 out of 8 are actually having outside issues such as neurological issues, such as anemias. We already know celiac disease, diabetes, especially type 1, which is autoimmune, thyroid conditions such as Hashimoto's or Graves', fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, lupus, various gut infections, because when the immune system's weak, we start seeing gut infections such as parasites and bacteria and fungus really start to run rampant. Skin issues such as psoriasis, eczema, dermatitis herpetiformis, and even psychological mood issues. You see lots of case studies of schizophrenia in the peer-reviewed literature. So we know gluten sensitivity really is at the hub of all these conditions. And it's important to note here, the old paradigm is celiac disease and gluten sensitivity were the only exclusive designation for a gluten issue. And now we know there are so many other issues you can have without expressing celiac. So I hope you enjoyed part 1, kind of laying out some of the research and how gluten is in more grains than what we consider gluten-free grains. So for more information, check the About section beneath the video, and you can grab our links and get access to more of our information to help you get better. Thanks. I hope you enjoy the video. Have a great day.